How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of On the Line. Hey guys, as you know or you don't know, I have a book coming out in the market called Inmate Manipulation, definitive guide. I'll get the title more specific. But it's going to come out in the market. It's not out yet, but it will be coming out in the market. And I want to have a quick story that kind of discusses the process. And I was reading a book called Another One Bites the Dust. No, I'm kidding. I got Connie on the show. She's going to share a story, and it was not in a book. Maybe it'll be in my book, hopefully. But I told you I was going to give a shot. So that was your shot. It's like, wait, what book is that? A lot of people underestimate the game of inmate manipulation. They avoid the process. They're focused on the outcome. And of course, they're like, well, it can't happen to me. And I think sometimes it's good for us to share stories where people kind of get how involved these games may be, you know, I mean, literally how they can connect with you and how they can use that connection to manipulate gain or some form of favor. So I think Connie has a great story, and hopefully I'm going to be able to put it in the forward of my book. But I think it's a story that actually really does focus on conflict, like, you know, a connection based on something that drew sympathy, and then a conflict in the choices that were being made. But yet, even with the conflict, still finding yourself going down this path, guys. That's what it is. It's motivation that's taking you somewhere, but you don't have any control. I mean, that's how complex these games are. And what I want to do, for if people could just bear with me, is to really focus on the story and not so much walking in and saying, well, that will never happen to me. That staff member's got to be an idiot. Don't minimize the game, guys. So I'm going to share a story right now. Connie's going to break it down, and then we're going to go back and revisit some areas. But it's an effort to really show you how complex this game is, and also to get an understanding of not just the thinking process of the inmate, but also what are you thinking about when the answer should be obviously no. So Connie, if you don't mind, can you explain the story, but also like that thinking process, like what's going on in your mind as this is happening?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Connie Alleyne. I'm the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host for The Fly Behind the Wall and a regular contributor to the Tier Talk family. So thank you for having me, Anthony. So my story really was one where, you know, I had a female offender who she had delivered her baby. Her baby was born with a rare blood disease, and the baby would not survive. They had him on life support. And ultimately, she had to make the decision as to when to take him off. It was a tough decision. I think it was tough for all of us involved. She had a clinical social worker who was working with her throughout the process. So I had worked with custody to make sure that she was able to have her clinical support at the hospital with her, which was already unprecedented because hospitals have hospice care. They have their own grievance teams. They have tons of people there to support patients who lose, or families who lose a patient. In this instant, the social worker went, supported her through the process. And of course, we were concerned about suicidal ideation. Here it is, she just lost a baby. She was incarcerated far away from family because she lived in another state. She was also a first-time incarceration inmate, which also made her high risk for suicide. And so at this point, we were really just trying to make sure she was stable, she had the support around her, and that we could prevent the liability of an attempted suicide or completion of a suicide. So fast forward, at some point we started having interdisciplinary team meetings just to make sure like everyone was on the same page about her treatment plan and that she was stable. And those team meetings did include custody so that they were aware of what we were doing with and for her and like understood the process. And it wasn't that they were on the outside looking in. I started to get letters from her. The first letter was, thank you so much, you know, Miss Alleyne, for, you know, allowing the social worker to be with me. It's been such a tough time. It was so helpful for her to be there. And, you know, as an administrator, like that feels good. Like this isn't, I need something from you. This is just thank you. It was an acknowledgement that here it was, I had done something that was helpful in a process where I actually felt helpless, right? But then I got another thank you note. And then I got another note, but this note was asking for something. This note was, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Would it be possible that you could help me get a new cellmate? apparently her cellie was having issues because she was crying at night, or at least that was the context of this letter. She wanted a new cellmate. And so, met with custody, tried to make the arrangements, and, that's fine. But then another note comes, and now there's a little shift in it. Now it's a note asking for double mattress. So she wanted another mattress. And that's still within the, medical wheelhouse, not necessarily clinically indicated, but it's still in the medical wheelhouse. But another note comes, at which point my secretary at the time was like, she's writing you again? What does she want? And I'm like, right? And so this time it was, could I help her get, a new work assignment, right? And certainly that is not in my wheelhouse. And I didn't call a meeting with her to understand why she wanted a new work assignment. It may have said something in the letter, but I don't remember what specifically she justified the work assignment for. But that wasn't in my tool house, right? And so the reality is that the requests now coming in weren't just thank you, they were requests for something. So there was some exchange. And, clearly she was trying to leverage this, I don't want to say relationship, but leverage this connection that she had established with me. Because here it was, she was kind of playing off of my sympathy. I did feel bad for her. I knew it was a tough situation. I really wanted to be helpful. So I found myself just second guessing, which I think is the reason why, this is probably one of those stories that we probably need to tell more often, because in the second guessing, I was still kind of going forward to help her. And then I ultimately called my clinic captain and I'm like, hey, listen, this is what she's asking for. And I think I probably wanted him to be like, Connie, what are we doing here? Right. But he was willing to help me. And in the moment, I was like, you know what? Why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this for her, because I wouldn't be doing it for everybody else. Right. But it was the moment where I'm like, so there is a process when you want a job, when you need a new work detail, there is a process. And she is actually using me to circumvent that process. Even when you want a second mattress, you don't write a note to the administrator. If you want a second mattress, that goes through custody, and then it may even go to the medical doctor. The custody may come over and be like, have this person assessed as to whether or not there's some justifiable reason to give this person a second mattress. In the facilities that I worked in, they actually stopped doing second mattresses. But here's all these things that came into play. And I think ultimately I had to be able to pull myself back and realize, although I wanted to be helpful, the reality is that the inmate was using the quote unquote relationship she thought she established with me to get other things that were outside of my scope.
All right, guys. So what I want to do is I want to break it down, because people from the outside, I don't think they realize how even just us being a little bit sympathetic can open up a doorway to stuff that we really don't want to be doing. Now, remember, it's empathy and sympathy are two different things. It's okay to be empathetic. That's more objective. Sympathetic, very subjective, very, very emotional. Decisions become more emotional based as opposed to just logic. So if we could back it up. So you connect on this sympathetic level because obviously she's a mother, just lost her child, so there's an immediate connection. I mean, to you as a woman, to you as a mother. I mean, there's a lot of things here that draw you to it. Now, again, we're connecting ourselves to it, not professionally, but rather on a human level. That's where the lines start to get blurred. And that's where most of us, we have to remind ourselves, hey, whoa. Yeah, I am human, but at the end of the day, I have a job to do. And my prescribed role says this is all I can do at this time. And I think the reason why when we discuss a little bit later of who's at fault, because you're a very professional individual. So you're putting a lot of this on yourself. And I understand why, and we'll get to that. But I also don't want to minimize the responsibility of the inmate who's playing the game. So when we talk about their first requests that are outside of the box, the thank you with the request, I will bet you each request had a hint of what that original connection was based on. So if you connected on that sympathetic level, her first two requests before she really goes outside the box has a small touch of that sympathetic connection, correct?
Yeah. So definitely what you saw in there was like, it was really helpful what you did to help me the first time. So it's almost like it's playing on, the fact that you are the administrator, you're here to help, like that's your role. And it's helping me to feel better. I think because she was involved in many of those treatment team meetings, she knew that we were all in a space of trying to avoid her from hurting herself, and we were pretty much going to try to do anything possible to make sure she was kept safe. And I think each request had a little bit of like, so the need to change her cellmate, I'm grieving, I shouldn't have to stifle my cry at night because my cellmate now wants to beat me up, right? Because I'm crying. It's like these kind of things, which I'm like, you know when you think about having lost a baby, how long do you grieve, right? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. Everybody grieves differently. But the thought is you should be able to express whatever that is because it's healthy for you to be able to do that. And the fact that you now feel threatened or like you can't do that, so you're right. Each request had a little bit of something in it that related to the first request or related to the event that caused the connection to begin with.
Right. And besides that connection, also a level of truth. It's plausible. Could happen.
Yeah.
I could have she could have a cellmate that's not dealing with this young lady's chance to recover or whatever it is. So there's that connection, but also something that's not really far fetched from the truth.
Right.
Now, and by the way, at this point, you're a high level administrator, correct? So you're
Yes.
in a position to grant these requests. So obviously, now the process doesn't have that immediate wake up call right away because you're at that high level where you can make it a yes. But then it gets to the request where it becomes a work detail, right? Now the work detail is, well, I'm going to have to go to someone else now. I'm going to have to now ask somebody for help. Now, what's your thought process?
So now that I have to go to someone, it's like, should you be going to someone, right? Like, so the way we do it, like we usually vet all requests. So, the secretary will go through all the requests. She'll divvy them out, right? All right, this is not appropriate for Connie. The nursing supervisor can handle it or someone else could handle it, right? And I feel it's the same thing with custody. There are some things that we need to escalate and there's some things we can handle on our own. But when I got this one, I was like, should you be going to custody for this? Like, that's not the process for someone who wants a work detail. And what does a new work detail have to do with the initial issue? Nothing. It had nothing to do with grieving. It had nothing to do with suicide. It had nothing to do with any of that. So I think that was why it was kind of one of those, now I'm going outside of my role to pull somebody else into this. And could this get him jammed up if I do that?
Right. And that's her first request that you couldn't connect to something sympathetic, right? Something
Right.
I've already connected. So this is the first time where you actually feel that, whoa, this person's taking advantage of me now. Because it makes total sense. So now it went from 1 and 2. I got that, makes sense. But now, like, why is she even asking me for a job? Like, this doesn't make any sense. It's not within my role. Now I have to go to someone else. So obviously there's your first feeling of conflict, right? Now, when you feel the conflict, obviously that's because something doesn't feel right. So now you're starting to look at this inmate saying, well, what about if she's playing me? So now you look at the inmate and then you also look at yourself. Are you upset at the inmate or are you upset at yourself?
At this point, I'm upset at myself and the inmate. Like, I'm like, Connie, what are you doing here? Right? It's kind of that, right? Like, you didn't see this coming because you feel like you should see it coming. You feel like, all right, they're going to ask you one thing, another thing. You should have anticipated something like this coming. And I didn't. I think it was the first time that I felt like the process was happening to me. As much as I've talked to staff, I've done training, I honestly was like, so you're getting got? And I think it was like that insulted kind of feeling too. It was like, I felt upset with myself that I didn't pick up on it. There was a lot happening, I think, in the moment that the shift came. And I think on one end, I don't know if I just wanted to make it happen so that I could stop getting the letters, not not necessarily thinking at the time that even if you make that happen, the requests are not going to stop, right? Like, because that's our reality. You start stepping out of your prescribed role and making things happen. You're helping the inmates circumvent the processes that are supposed to keep us all safe. The requests aren't going to stop. I feel like they're only going to escalate.
Yeah, and by the way, it's great that you shared this story because there's a lot for people to learn from this story. Again, it is a process, but look at the immediate connection and how that connection could have advanced you into going down a path that you never had the intent to go down. Even the first thank you, which you probably never gotten before, correct? Not in that manner. I'm sure you've gotten verbal thank yous. We get that all the time, but an actual personal thank you note. How come at that point that wouldn't be a slight wake up call?
I don't know. I think because part of the therapeutic process has been us encouraging them to write, encouraging them to color, encouraging them to like do other things that would sort of distract them from whatever the situation is, or, something else to preoccupy their time. And so I think at the first letter, I was like, oh, that was thoughtful. Or I was thinking, it wasn't just another good deed that went unnoticed, right? Like I was like, oh, okay. So she appreciated that. Like throughout whatever this healing process is that she's been going through, treatment with the social worker, with the psychiatrist, the psychologist, like something's working. And that's what I thought. I thought like this was probably one of those steps in her healing process to just say thank you for those who have been helpful to her on this journey.
And guys, the reason why this story is so important is because people spend a lot of time downplaying the game. And at the end, it is very advanced. It is something that, could happen to any one of us. So at any point in time, we really need to go back, have that insight, feel what we're feeling, and then try to understand why we're feeling that way. Because if Connie just would have went down the path, ignored the feelings because she's so into the behavior that she's, committed herself to, who knows where she would be. But the biggest concern is because she was a higher level, who knows where she could have took others. Remember, she had a very good rapport with a captain who they had this trust level, and it happens, guys. It happens. We always got to be on our toes. But sometimes, guys, we trust people. And if something comes from Connie, I may sign it blindly because it's Connie. I know Connie, and again, am I saying it's the right thing? It's not. But having said that, we're human, guys. Sometimes we get caught up in the business of the day and that we're like, hey, that's Connie. I got that, and don't worry, it came from Connie. Don't worry, it came from Connie. And then next thing you see Connie being taken out in handcuffs, like, uh-oh, I messed up. But it's true. I think the couple of wake up calls, just because we just revisit, is you noticing that there was a problem when you notice that, first off, the requests are now coming from something I cannot do without getting help. But what am I bringing people into now? Your concern for other people made you go back and revisit yourself. That's my opinion. But I really do truly believe that. I believe that once you started to think that bringing the captain or whoever was into this was like, wait a second, what am I really doing? Because what's funny too is sometimes when we have the ability to authorize a yes, sometimes we may do it blindly. But sometimes when we have to go to someone else to authorize that yes, like let's say our supervisor, we start to thinking like, why does this yes feel awkward? Like, why is it like that I feel a little strange asking this person for that request? That's when you got to step back now and think like, wait a second here. Maybe the request really isn't an honest request. Hey, Connie, you like to say anything in closing?
I would just like to say that this can happen to the best of us. I certainly had my eyes wide open. I think working with male offenders versus female offenders, you learn a lot because the way they communicate is different. And I think that the way the game is played is different based on gender. And we've not really talked about that before. But I do think that there is a significant difference on how the game is played between the way males manipulate versus females manipulating. Females being very relational, they talk to you, it's a totally different process, which I do think we should explore. But I would just say, stay on your toes, really stay situationally aware, and never get so confident that it just can't happen to you, because it can, depending on the right player and the right game that has been catered to you.
Well said. Guys, again, just another great show. Just a way to identify the process, not to minimize the intelligence behind the game, and just another way of looking past the outcome. Please look past the outcome. Motive's always about control. As always, guys, the show is on the line. Don't forget, guys, check out Guardian RFID. Make sure you subscribe. New episode every Friday. Stay safe.